Today, we're diving into Carlsbad, California. And this is a city where the past isn't just, a memory in a book. It's really a living, breathing blueprint. We're going to see how choices made more than 100 years ago about water, about buildings, about the coastline, are still shaping pretty much everything in the city today. I love this quote from Mary Allen, who was one of the city's very first historians. It just nails the heart of Carlsbad's story, doesn't it? It tells you right away this isn't some simple, polished fairy tale. It's a real story told with a lot of pride, yeah, but also with a really clear-eyed view of its complicated human past. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to connect the dots between three huge parts of Carlsbad's story and its present. The water that literally gave it life, the architectural vision that gave it its unique character, and of course the coastline that gave it its identity. Okay, before we jump into all that, let's get our bearings really quick. The story starts way before Carlsbad was even a city, with Spanish explorers back in the 1700s, and then these huge Mexican land grants like Rancho Agua Hedionda. But the real game changer, the moment that truly kicks things off, happens in 1883 with just a simple well. And believe it or not, it's not until 1952 that Carlsbad officially becomes a city. And that leads us right to our first major theme, water. See, for Carlsbad, water isn't just a utility, it's the city's entire origin story. It's what gave the city its name, its fame, and its whole reason for being. It all kicked off in 1883. A settler named John Frazier digs a well, and when they get the water tested, they find out it's chemically almost identical to the water from a world-famous spa in Carlsbad, Bohemia. All of a sudden, this wasn't just a well anymore. It was a miracle cure, a fountain of health that was going to put this tiny little spot on the map. And wow, did the hype take off. This poem from back in the day just captures that feeling of wonder perfectly. People started flocking to Carlsbad, all chasing the promise of this magical water. It created this health resort identity for the town that, honestly, you can still feel a little bit of today. Okay, now let's fast forward to today. Carlsbad's quest for water is still going, but the scale is just massive. The city's modern water story is all about this number, 50 million. That's how many gallons of fresh water its desalination plant pumps out every single day. You can think of this plant as the modern-day Frazier's well, just on an industrial super scale. It's a drought-proof water supply for the whole region. So it's pretty clear, right? From the 1880s to right now, the challenge of getting enough water has been absolutely central to what Carlsbad is. All right, so we've covered the physical resource of water. Let's shift gears and talk about the human element, the community's vision for itself. This is really the story of how a bunch of individual dreams grew into a collective plan for what Carlsbad should actually look and feel like. Back in the 1880s, that vision was being shaped by pioneers like the Kellys and the Shutes. They weren't just building places to live, they were making huge architectural statements. Places like the famous Twin Inns weren't just buildings, they were becoming the foundation of the town's whole character. And what a character it was. The early style was this really ornate Queen Anne revival, lots of detailed carvings and decorative shingles. Now, you compare that to today's village and barrio master plan. The whole philosophy has shifted. Now it's about function and community, walkable storefronts, inviting windows, and making sure the streets aren't just dominated by garage doors. The vision has really evolved from showing off individual wealth to creating a shared public experience. This quote from the master plan, it really sums up the modern vision perfectly. The goal is to manage growth while holding on to a very specific feeling, that small town beach community character. It's all about making a place where people want to walk around, hang out, and just interact with each other. But how do you actually legislate a vibe? Well, you can see it in what the city is prioritizing for its village core. They're encouraging things like breweries, live work units, and farmers markets. And these choices aren't random. They are very deliberate moves to engineer that vibrant, community-focused feel the plan is aiming for. For a final theme, let's turn to Carlsbad's most defining feature, its coastline. This is a story of transformation, from a massive private cattle ranch into a public treasure that everybody loves. This is kind of wild to think about now, but back in the mid-1800s, what we know as Carlsbad's beaches were all part of Rancho Agua Hedionda. This was not a public park. We're talking thousands of acres of private land, originally granted to a man named Juan Maria Moran way back in 1842. And then you look at it today. Carlsbad State Beach is pretty much the definition of a Southern California coast. It's clean, it's family-friendly, and it's open for everyone to enjoy. The journey from a private cattle ranch to a public space that's so treasured, it's really one of the city's greatest success stories. This whole transformation speaks to the city's resilience. It reminds me of this great little story from the old pioneer days. A guy named William Borden stuck a pepper tree limb into the ground upside down, thinking he could just use it as a hitching post and it would never grow. But guess what? It took root anyway. And that's just a perfect metaphor for Carlsbad, isn't it? A place that's unexpectedly tough and just determined to thrive. So, after tracing all these threads from the past straight into the present, we're left with the question of the future. How does Carlsbad keep writing its story? You can see this incredible pattern has emerged, right? The obsession with water evolved from one little well to a massive desalination plant. The vision for community went from fancy private homes to a master plan for a walkable village. What this really shows is a city that's always in a conversation with itself, constantly reinventing its future, but always around the same core ideas from its past. And that leaves us with the central challenge for Carlsbad's future. As it keeps growing and changing, which all great cities do, how does it hold on to that essential character? That village by the sea soul that was born from a mineral well and a pioneer's dream? That's the challenge that's going to define its next chapter.